Hello everyone, I'm your host Ingrid Thompson. Welcome to So You Want to Start a Business, episode number 79. Our guest today is Leanne Isaacson. Leanne is a farmer and runs and has run farming businesses. She's a country girl at heart and she now operates on a global platform. They had one farm, bought a second farm, and at one stage had 5 farms and millions of dollars of debt. To grow one of the farms into a financially viable business, Leanne turned to online and Facebook for marketing. Fascinating story about using online platforms to build a business that became extremely successful. Her business stories are terrific. And while you might be wondering what on earth can I learn from farming stories, to that I'd say business is business, and I truly believe that we can learn more from businesses outside our industry than we ever can from looking at our own industry.
Absolutely. And I think, I can sit here today and say that if that farming business had actually wound up, I would be in a much better position now than what I am. But again,
you can't do it.
And I think, like in a lot of cases, I mean, there's so much wrapped up in it, especially when it's your own, when it's your own business. And I think that, there's pride, there's emotion, there's all sorts of things. But, and I remember at the time thinking, we can work this out, we can pull ourselves out of it. But then because of the situation, my commitment to the whole business disintegrated. So exactly what you just said, taking the tough decisions, taking a lot of the taking emotion away, basing it on pure fact and business. That is, it's a huge thing. But you can't do that yourself.
That's Leanne talking about tough decisions. And they had to make some pretty tough decisions, as you can imagine. But we all have to make these tough decisions in business. Leanne and I spend quite a bit of time discussing what it takes to make tough decisions in business, how to make them, and who else needs to be involved. Because as she said there, you can't do it alone. This is a slightly longer interview. Leanne has a wealth of experience and she generously shares it here with us. And you won't be surprised that I actually chip in quite a bit on some of the topics. So there's a bit of me in here as well. As always, there's no advertising on this podcast. This episode is brought to you by my book with the same name as the podcast, So You Want to Start a Business. So if you haven't had a chance to read the book, head over to wherever you buy your books online for a Kindle or a physical book. If you don't already have a copy and you'd like to read an extract, thestartupsteps.com, there's about 20 pages waiting for you. And you may or may not know, but there's a full audio version being made available through this podcast. You might want to cycle back through some of the recent episodes where I'm reading some of the chapters. If you've been listening for a while, you've read the book, worked through some of the activities, maybe you're ready to chat with me about your business goals. There's 2 ways you can make contact with me. Are we connected on LinkedIn? Send me a note, connect, and then ask me any questions you have or ask to set up a discovery session where we can chat about your goals. I use Zoom and it's just like we're actually in the same room. It's fabulous. Love this technology. Or you can send me an email directly, ingrid@healthynumbers.com.au. Whether you're launching a brand new business or you're taking that existing business to new heights, I'm here to help you turn your dream into a viable reality. Anyway, enough from me. Please reach out if you want to have a chat with me about your goals. Let's listen now to what Leanne has to say about starting and running her businesses. So much more. Are you ready? Let's go.
Hello, Leanne. How are you going this morning?
I'm great. Thanks, Ingrid. How are you?
Very well, thanks. Thanks so much for joining us. And we are in for a treat today because when I ask you this question, what business are you in? You've got a bit of a complex answer, haven't you?
I do have a very complex answer. I've been a farmer for most of my life, and so we had a farming business, which was a pretty traditional sort of a farming business. It was cattle and cropping. Effectively, we grew really great cattle, sent it off to market, and at the end of the day, it depended on all the buyers and what they were prepared to pay, whether they had a heap of cattle in, and you might get less money than what the cattle was actually worth. So we did that for a very long time, and then in 2008 bought a different farming business, a different farm, and I decided that, so it was a lucerne and cereal hay growing property, and so I decided that I would actually create a new business and a brand and market our hay direct to customers based on quality and service rather than necessarily just price. So I have that. I also have my own business within online marketing and online learning, and LinkedIn is I say my weapon of choice. So LinkedIn is my business. So it all sort of has blended together for a very long time.
Yeah, and I love LinkedIn too. So anyone who's listening can find either of us on LinkedIn. So I'm Ingrid Thompson, and it's Leanne Isaacson. So we can find us on LinkedIn. So so one business grew to the next one. So what we call that in business language, where you have the cattle and then the hay and the lucerne, is that something that those cattle ate, or is that something that different animals eat?
Well, the original plan was that we bought a property that we were going to grow the hay, grow hay and finish off our young ones on irrigation, and so they would turn out better animals. So that sort of was the intent originally of buying the separate farm. But the lucerne hay that we started wasn't intended for our own cattle. It was actually intended for the horse industry.
Okay, so it was different because there's that vertical business where you start to be your own supplier, and you have this, you buy from your own businesses, and you then the next business would be to have an abattoir and to have a trucking and wholesale, and you wouldn't want to have all that, but but there are businesses that start to do that, aren't they? They get the whole chain, but that's not. So this was a completely separate business. It happened to be feed, but it was for a different animal.
That's right. Yes, it was. I mean, we could have just gone down that path, but I chose to actually create a niche business.
So if you think about and so we've already sort of talked about the when, that was quite a while ago, is why did you start? Why start these businesses? You saw the opportunity for the lucerne and the hay, and then you've moved into the marketing. So why start more businesses? Why do you start a business?
So we really started that particular fodder business because, as I said, I'd run our farming business for probably 20 years before that, as far as our broadacre business. So and I had also worked in an off-farm as well, building a community education network. So effectively, that was a business in its right. So I'd had all of that experience, and I knew that to be able to get better pricing for our products, to actually create a separate business and market it that in its own right was going to financially be better for us.
Very, very good. So what you're looking for from the business is a better business model, better pricing, and also it sounds like this knowledge that you have about online marketing has been part of what has taken you to the next business, which is this marketing. So it's sort of bringing all these skills together into what's available to us as we approach 2020 in the online space.
Yeah, it's actually interesting because literally when we bought that last farm, I had the opportunity to do an online marketing course, and it was a face-to-face course. So I would physically travel probably nearly an hour to get to where this course was held. So I think it was 6 weeks, and it was back in 2008. And so I was learning about creating domains, and creating websites and Google Analytics and AdWords. And so I was learning all of that in this particular course. So it was really great timing because I was able to actually apply all of the learning that I was doing there to our farm business. So, I effectively, I created a name, I got a logo outsourced, I created a free website myself and put that onto a domain. So I created a domain called Loose and Hay for Sale. And so I was applying what I was learning in this course, you know, to our business straight away. And so it was the, you know, that was probably, you know, really fortunate timing.
Yeah.
That again, I was learning, but I was able to actually apply that and use that. So that's really probably, you know, where, I mean, I've been an online educator for a very long time, but it was the marketing side of it is what I started to learn.
Yeah, and it's fascinating to think that in 2008, because that is so long ago now, and we've come so far since 2008, and it was okay to set up a free website, which you just really can't do to the same degree now, can you? I mean, it was much more acceptable for it to be kind of cobbled together, wasn't it, in that way?
Yeah, it was interesting because, you know, like I installed the site myself and then I was learning about Google AdWords and Google Analytics. So I installed all of that on the site myself, and then I realized that I was getting a lot of traffic. So I ended up, again, at the time, you know, we were learning about outsourcing, and so I outsourced the design of my website to a company in India, and that was back in 2008. So I think I paid $600 for a fully coded HTML website.
Wow.
Back in 2008. And so I installed, you know, an autoresponder on there to actually, you know, to collect email addresses. So effectively that business was marketed completely online. But one of the challenges that I found is because we were so early, like if someone Googled Loose and Hay for Sale, no matter where they were in Australia, our website came up, you know, came up top. So, but most people didn't actually read where we were. So that, you know, that was also so I didn't actually have people having the ability to physically click and purchase online because I didn't, you know, I had examples of, you know, like a truck driver rang me one morning. We were on our way to netball, and he said, "Oh, I'm just wondering whether I could come and pick up a load of hay." And there was something that just made me keep asking him questions. And he said, "Oh, I'm just around the corner." I said, "Oh, whereabouts are you?" Well, he was in Sydney. And so, you know, like, so I was always very conscious to actually not set up an actual store online because, you know, I would be I had a phone call from someone in Sydney asking whether they could order a bale of hay for their rabbit. So,
and Leanne, just because, you know, more than half of our audience is actually in the US, whereabouts in Australia are you?
So I'm in Adelaide in South Australia.
And about how far would that fellow have to come to pick up his bale of hay for a rabbit? How long would it take him to drive from Sydney to Adelaide?
It would probably take about 15 hours. It would be about 1,000 miles. It's about 40.
For all of our listeners, you know, so that's actually a really it's such an interesting thing now, is that with all the geolocators now, that probably wouldn't happen. So if we go back to that business, so you've got that set up, you've put your autoresponders in, you've got your own website. When did that business feel real? And when you think about, you know, a business, how does it go from being this idea, this thing you're working on, when does it feel real? How did that feel real?
I think when we started, I mean, effectively when we had hay, well, we needed to find customers.
Yeah.
So, you know, hay certainly can be stored for, you know, a certain amount of, you know, well, it can be stored for quite a while, but, you know, we ended up having, probably 15,000, you know, bales of hay. So, you know, we couldn't physically store it all. So it was sort of one of those things where we had to find customers. I think it probably became pretty real straight away because it was very tangible.
Yes.
It's a very tangible thing. You know, when we grew hay, we sold it. So, you know, it would go on the back of the truck and physically drive out the gate and be delivered to customers. So we actually did the whole process. So we grew the hay, we stored it, we marketed it, and we delivered it. So, you know, there was all sorts of parts of the chain. And so, you know, I did the customer service. So we'd never had effectively it was a wholesale business.
Yes.
But we also sell to fodder stores.
Yeah.
So, you know, it was sort of, you know, wholesale, retail, you know, all combined.
So it's pretty real from the beginning. 15,000 bales of hay is a pretty big shed. You need to.
Yeah.
So you said about the customers. So how did you know? And, you know, it's probably pretty obvious because you were in the cattle business, you were in this fodder environment. How did you know that people wanted this specific product? And, you know, how do you know that this business was going to be viable for the whole setup that you were creating?
So the farm that we bought had the previous owner already sold to some, you know, so we sort of had a list of some of the horse customers. Horses were not part of our world at all. So it was a world that I had to learn about. You know, I had to learn about, you know, the difference in, you know, what particular horse and riding required versus, you know, like a stock horse used to require sort of different feed to you know, say a racehorse. So I had to learn all about that. And so it was really, and probably my networking skills as well, that certainly helped.
So that's a really interesting point you raised there, because it's very easy for us to think we're in this business and we might buy this other business because it's sort of the same. But as it turns out, horses are very different to cattle. And then when you get to horses, there's all these different types of horses. Now, when you say that, and we might listen to it and think, yeah, well, of course there are. But going into the business, we may not see it. So that's a very insightful piece that you've raised there, Leanne, because, you know, somebody might do the same in the health industry or in, you know, some other aspect of retail, move into an area that looks like it's related, but in fact not.
That's right. And one of the things that, you know, over the time, like I did learn, like I was learning a lot about social media and marketing. And so, you know, I'm probably, I was going to say I'm a learning junkie. And I proudly say that because like I'm learning all the time. And so I was learning more about online marketing and social media marketing. And what I did is I was learning about Facebook pages and Facebook because, you know, like I did a lot with Google advertising to start with, like Google AdWords. But then, of course, over the years when Facebook became, you know, more prolific and Facebook ads were becoming, and it was back in 2013 sort of when I, you know, started to do some Facebook advertising. So I was learning about that and sort of, you know, I worked out pretty quickly that horse owners were on Facebook. And so, you know, there were horse groups, but also, you know, like I could do some pretty accurate pinpointing of horse owners. So I was learning about Facebook, as I said, Facebook pages. And so I created, again, as part of my learning, I was doing like an online course with a chap from the United States. So I created a page called I Love My Horse Today. And so I started that page, and with what I was learning about Facebook ads and targeting, and so I actually grew that page from it was literally from scratch to 10,000 fans in less than 21 days.
Wow.
Just through really targeted advertising, you know, like really targeted ads and advertising. And so that page now has 36,000 fans.
Wow.
And so, but again, you know, I had to learn about, because that was not geographically based, because, you know, it wasn't physical products that I, you know, hay that I was selling on that page. It was just really my learning. And so but what I had to do was, because a lot of the fans of that particular page were from the US, and they have a very, very different riding style and horse style to what the Australians do. So and I've I knew nothing about this. So then I had to work out what would engage the actual fans of the page. And so it was very much, you know, Western riding and associated, rather than the English riding style. So it was, as a marketer, I had to take off my own, you know, what I knew and what effectively press my buttons, and think about what the actual customer, you know, what would press their buttons. And, you know, I'd put up a photo of something and I'd think, oh, no one will be interested in that. And it would get huge engagement. I think, you know, I used to, and like I said, it was back in 2013. So again, so all of while, fast forward 10 years effectively, like our Currency Creek Fine Fodder business doesn't exist anymore through marriage separation and farm sales. And I mean, I could talk all day about, in banks and, finance and cash flow. And, effectively when we bought the farm at, the Lucerne farm, we had 6 months where we actually had no product. And so we were almost starting from behind. So like I said, there's all sorts of tales.
So I just want to bring you, so the Facebook page, so we started talking there about the customers for the hay, and you needed to make sure that they were within driving distance or at least transport distance of actually picking up the hay. And then you started to learn more about online marketing, and this is what morphed into your next business. So, this Facebook group with 36,000 people in the United States riding their horses are never going to buy your hay. So this is the next sort of evolution of your journey as a business. And we see this happen quite often in businesses. I interviewed Travis Jones earlier, just towards the end of last year, and he's a gym. He has setting up gyms. And from that, he has developed a marketing business for the gym industry because needing to have somebody who was specifically with the knowledge of that area. So it sounds like this is kind of what's happened with your journey, is that you've moved into this interesting area, and as you say, for fun, you set up this Facebook group. So there's a couple of things that I'd like to just bring it back to our questions and our discussion. But so it shows how sometimes in a business that leads you to another business opportunity, there's also the danger of it leading to something that actually wastes your time, potentially.
Yeah,
in your example, it didn't, because it's then taken you. But, I'm thinking it's very easy, and I see it today because Instagram and Facebook and these things are such fun that I see a lot of businesses, heading in that direction. So unless there's a strategic reason behind it, like you were using it for your learning junkie, you were using it to understand more about marketing, to understand what ads could do and things like that. But there's a real, could you just comment on that? I know it's not one of our questions we normally ask, but there is a danger of heading too much down a path that's fun and interesting that may or may not actually resolve or come to anything for a business.
Absolutely. And probably, like that Facebook page it's probably a very good example, because although, so I was learning a lot about Facebook ads and engagement, I did create a page for Currency Creek Fine Fodder. So, I was using, the learning actually for our business, but I was spending quite a bit of time learning about, and so, that particular page, I didn't monetize that page at all. And, effectively, I remember someone saying to me, why don't you sell it? You could actually sell that page to
sell the whole page.
And, I was also learning about marketing. So absolutely, you certainly can, if it's a passion, it can certainly take you down a rabbit hole and lose focus on the actual core parts of your business.
So if you're talking about whether, and now we can move away from the Lucerne and the hay business because it doesn't exist anymore. So in your marketing business now, so you've sort of morphed into, you specialize in LinkedIn, you do online marketing, you've clearly got a lot of expertise in Facebook. How do you find new customers now? How do you know who they are and what they want?
Generally with LinkedIn, and over the years, so I joined LinkedIn in 2007, and so again, it was, part of my online, I was learning about it, and I'm naturally a connector. So, while LinkedIn certainly is my specialty, it's actually probably more about my innate ability to build connections, see the big picture, and put people together. So that's what I tend to use my LinkedIn network for. That really is how I sort of came to LinkedIn. And probably over the years, I have had a few different sorts of I can effectively help anyone on LinkedIn, But at the end of the day, we know, if you're trying to talk to everyone, no one hears. So, being very specific in who you're marketing, who your client is and marketing to. And I, again, I'm probably an example sometimes of what not to do. But so really over the years, I've used LinkedIn to help put people together. So, I had a client in Colorado who had animated, he had an animation, and it was physically animated by a group in London. And he said to me one day, he said, Leanne, can you find me a lawyer in London that specialises in media and entertainment law? Because the BBC were looking at picking up this particular animation. So, because my network is so large, I could do some real, and being, with my experience, I could do some really strategic searches, narrow it down, have a look at some profiles and pick one person that I thought would be a good fit. So, I effectively put those two together.
Fantastic.
So that's what, so yeah, it's the connecting people that I tend to, to do. So at the moment, I've been helping a lot of speakers and coaches and entrepreneurs with, with being found. And, my tagline is stand up, speak out and be found.
Stand up, speak out and be found. That's fantastic. So just to talk about pricing in business. So you had the cattle, which, as you said, sometimes the price is up, sometimes the price is down. So that's a price that's dictated by the market. The hay and the lucerne pricing strategy, did you set the prices or did the market set the prices?
Well,
and then, so just philosophically, how do you approach pricing?
So with the hay, if there were a lot of people selling hay quite cheaply, but we knew that if we actually sold it at those sorts of prices, it was not profitable. So with our marketing, so I set the price, and then I marketed very much on quality and service. So that was but again, it's probably a very finicky market that if somebody would could sell someone a bale of hay, $1 cheaper, they would go to them. So, that was the nature of the of the client base that we were working with. So, with my LinkedIn and my social media stuff, in a lot of cases,
this is an area that people really grapple with, isn't it? Is how to price a service. We talk about hourly rates, we talk about packaging, we talk about bundling. So can you talk a little bit about how you set a pricing strategy for this sort of business?
So honestly, that was probably the hardest thing that I did, and I reckon you'll find most people saying the same thing. And for a long time, because I worked a lot within community organisations, and so probably the nature of where I had come from didn't often see the value in what I was doing. So actually coming up with a pricing structure for me was really, it was probably more a mindset change, and it's about thinking about the value that you can actually bring to a client rather than thinking about, like an hourly, say an hourly rate. And one of the things that I did learn I used to coordinate adult education, and one of the things that I learned was that who was I to judge whether somebody was worth $50 an hour or $75 an hour? So I learned that was my own philosophy. So again, and probably from a pricing perspective for my services, I sort of tend to sort of juggle a bit between, an hourly rate or a package price. And again, it sort of just depends, like on each individual client as to what they might need. So, but it did take me a very, very long time when somebody asked me how much is it to be able to just say, straight off my tongue how much it was. It took me a very long time to actually be comfortable to actually say that.
Isn't it interesting? Because, to have had a background like you had, if somebody rang and said, how much is a bale of hay, how much is a sack of lucerne, you could just say the price. And yet when we come to price ourselves, and you work with coaches, and I work with health professionals, I work with people who sell their service all the time, and some people just can say what it's worth, and some people really struggle. So it's a really interesting aspect of, and so would you advise, if somebody struggles with this, that they get some help with that they get themselves a coach, or they get themselves somebody to practice with, or find a mastermind group? Like, how would you say somebody tackle that struggle that they have for saying how much somebody's worth? What did you do?
There was probably a few things that I did. Like I said, I could talk all day because there's been all sorts of aspects to my world. So I went to a professional. So for other parts of my world. So I worked with a psychologist, and as far as changing my own mindset and my own self-confidence and self-belief, that was huge from a personal perspective. But I've also had a couple of coaches and mentors over the time, and I'm also in quite a number of sort of, like Facebook groups. So yeah, like I'm constantly getting feedback and seeking, getting others to help me. So yeah, it certainly is. And also probably, one of the things that I'm not sure whether I'm unique or not, but like I work a lot with, my perceived competitors, and form sort of partnerships and great relationships with them. So if I'm sort of going, how much am I going to charge for this service, I'll get in touch with somebody else that does the same thing, that that knows that we're not directly competing for clients, but I'll say, hey, how do you price it? And I might speak to a couple and go, okay, right, well, if that's how they're doing it, then then my cost is around the mark. So I think that's
terrific.
One thing.
Yeah. Sorry, that's one thing.
I was just going to say, I think that's one thing that a lot of businesses tend to not do, is actually work closely with other, like other business owners, because there's always the fear that they're going to either take your clients, or so yeah, there sort of tends to be a bit of a different mentality. And I think, whether it's growing up in the country, I'm not quite sure what it is, like about me, but, like I do build relationships, and I have that trust that I do, working with others is what I do best.
Well, and I think you raised such a good point there, because, there's so many people think there's just this much pie. And if I talk about my piece of the pie, then that means that someone else might get a bite of my piece. And so, but, I always think this, and Stephen Covey, I think, is the person who talked about this first, is there's more than enough pie for everybody. There's an expanding universe of people who need our help. Just interesting about pricing. The ACCC actually does have something to say about fixed pricing, because there are certain industries where people are not allowed to talk to each other about how much they charge, because the ACCC sees it as, like fixed prices.
It's colluding.
Colluding, that's the word I'm looking for. So yeah, so there's that. But I don't think what you're talking about is collusion at all.
No,
it's very smart business.
I've not quite been able to get all of the trainers across the universe to agree to a set price. So no, I don't think that's ever going to happen.
So listeners, if you're thinking about chumming up with some people, and the thing is, because of today's world, you can ask people in other parts of the country, you can ask people in other parts of the world for their thoughts on what you're doing, and it's so not collusion, but it's collaborative. And I think that's it's such a big difference, isn't it?
Absolutely. And I think, as far as from a marketing perspective, a lot of small businesses forget that other people have their customers as well. And so being able to actually work together with other, not necessarily businesses in the same industry, but businesses that like are allied, that's just such, like it's such a huge way of, like increasing your market awareness and your ability to gain different customers. And, it really works out a win-win situation for for both
Totally.
businesses.
Yeah, such wisdom there. Thanks so much, Leanne. So you've kind of answered some of these next questions because of our conversation, but let's hone in on one or two examples. So something you'd wish you'd done differently at the beginning. So you've had various businesses and you've learned along the way, but is there something somewhere you did that you thought, I wish that had been different?
I think so. Thinking about our farming business, at one stage we had 5 farms and owed over $2 million, which was an interesting, an interesting scenario. And I think at the time, there were we could have. I hate the word should. We could have sold a couple of the farms to reduce debt, to actually allow us to focus on what we were doing. But, there were family farms and there were reasons why, my husband didn't want. So, at the time, I always say we make decisions at a point in time with the knowledge that we have that are right at that point. And, hindsight is, look, if we all had crystal balls and hindsight, it's such a wonderful thing. But, and I think one thing that I've learned is to accept because the business and the farms that we created, we ended up having to sell those from a financial perspective. Effectively the bank sold them, and we were left with a couple of $100,000 in left. We sold them for less than what we owed. So it's very easy to actually sit and beat yourself up about decisions that you made, but they were right at the time. And while there are certain things, you take responsibility for the decisions that you made, but then certainly there are other outside aspects that you have very little control over. So it's it's sort of coming to the acceptance of what you can control and the decisions that you made, not beating yourself up about them, and taking the positives out of them. And I could quite easily sit here and so I wish we'd never left the original farm and bought the other farms, and I wish we'd never done this. But I think about all of those experience that I've got that have actually put me in the position that I am today. And if we'd not done any of that, I wouldn't know what I know and have met the amazing people and the amazing opportunities. So I think it's taking, as tough as it is, and I think a lot of times, putting on a smile and a brave face hides a lot of pain, but still taking more positives from every experience is certainly what I try to do. And like I said, you make decisions at a point in time that are right.
You do. And I think one of the things that you're drawing attention to there is that sometimes in business, making tough decisions might not be what we want to do, but making those decisions at a time can actually free the business up to move forward. And I see this in so many different ways. This plays out and I'm sure you see the same thing, is that people hang on to ideas or hang on to a product line or hang on to a service that they're offering because there's this attachment. Now, you talked about 5 farms and a huge debt. So there's an emotional attachment to each of those properties. Had there been a practical pros and cons, let's map out the finances approach to making decisions about which farms to keep and which farms to sell. And I'm not saying that you would have, but sometimes having that very practical approach, and we see it, if you listen to, the people from Google, if you listen to Bezos from Amazon, these people have made tough decisions about dropping parts of the market that they haven't wanted to continue in because they don't want to waste any more money. And I think that's one of the tough things that when you're getting started in a business is that even if you're attached to the idea or you design a bikini or you design a vase or whatever your products are, if it's not working, stop. Like it's
absolutely
do the maths. do the pros and cons, do the numbers, do the data, and make the decisions based on facts, not this emotional attachment to long-standing beliefs or it's the emotional side of it. So,
Absolutely.
I think that if you go right back to what you said there at the beginning of that answer, is that was a huge amount of debt to have, and making decisions to offload things that aren't working or to take advantage of something when it's at a high price.
Absolutely. And I think, I can sit here today and say that if I had, if that farming business had actually wound up when our marriage first disintegrated, I would be in a much better position now than what I am. But again,
you can't do it. No.
And I think, like in a lot of cases, I mean, there's so much wrapped up in it, especially when it's your own, when it's your own business. And I think that, there's pride, there's emotion, there's all sorts of things. But, and I remember at the time thinking, we can work this out, we can pull ourselves out of it. But then, because of the situation, my commitment to the whole business disintegrated. And I think
more than that.
Absolutely. So with exactly what you just said, taking the tough decisions, taking a lot of the taking emotion away, basing it on pure fact and business. That is, it's a huge thing. But you can't do that. But you can't do that yourself.
No, you need help. You need the accountants involved. You need a coach. You need somebody from the outside. And that's where, and my next question is about, who's been of greatest assistance to you. You've already talked about the people that have been involved. You've had coaches, you've got Facebook groups, you've got masterminds. So I do feel like you've probably already answered that question, because it is one that is important to ask, who is greatest assistance to a business? Because when you're in a business on your own, you're on your own. I mean, you had a partner, it was your husband, and we could have a whole podcast about partnerships, as in business partnerships, or the combination of marriage partnership and business partnership. That's fraught with all kinds of potential for greatness or the other. But, so if you've already mentioned Facebook groups and mentors and coaches, but is there anyone else that has been of terrific assistance to you?
Oh, probably my family and friends, I think. And it's one of those things that, having a couple of trust, family's one thing, but sometimes when it's tied up, when it's a family business, it's not necessarily, easy to sort through that. But I think, having a couple of really close friends that you can just blur, but will not necessarily just tell you the good stuff, that will kick your bum when your bum needs kicking, or pulling you out of the wallowing moments, or so I think it certainly is. It's a combination, but getting external professional support, but also having the people that that love you unconditionally, whether you're good, bad, or good, bad, or ugly.
And do these people give you feedback as well? Is that where you get good feedback, or do you get feedback from anywhere else?
I think sort of so. So over the years, I've had a coach. He's actually in London, and I say to him, he's the most patient person I think that I've ever had in my world, and he will certainly give me feedback. So I don't sort of talk to him as often as I used to. I was, in a program with him for a couple of years, and so, but then he and I just became really, really good friends. So he certainly gives me honest feedback, and usually when I'm really needing somebody that can take a big picture look and knows me inside and out, he's usually the one that I'll get in touch with and say, "Hey, Rich, this is the story," and I can usually guarantee he'll either give me the praise, or the self-belief back, or he'll also say, for goodness sake, pull yourself, say what you're going to do and just do it. I'm sick of hearing you saying you're going to do it.
And it's a fascinating how someone who's had that couple of years with you and then the ongoing relationship can just sift through and go to the nub, go to the absolute what it is that needs to be said, because they've got that background with you. And, so can just sift through all of that nonsense, noise, and just go straight to the detail. Terrific.
Absolutely. And he can usually tell if I say I'm okay. He'll know just by my words that I'm not okay, and he'll then press me. And so I think people often, if you don't have the experience, if you haven't been in a world that coaches are just accepted and part of your world, then it's very difficult to actually even contemplate what a coach can do for you. So it's sort of again in business, you don't know what you don't know, and it's taking the chance to actually give it a go, and but finding a good coach is really key.
It is, and there's a number of ways to approach that search, because not every coach is the right coach for every person. So and that's why there's so many, and there's some that are much better than others, and
yeah.
So
and I often sorry.
Go on.
Oh, I was just going to say, same, thinking about LinkedIn. There's so many people that work within, within LinkedIn and, teach people and coach people. And again, it comes back to what an individual particularly needs and what business they're in and personality as well. So, I'm very extroverted and can talk a lot, but I also probably over the years have done enough communication and personality and facilitation that I do know when to keep my mouth shut. So that's also another
but you're in an interview, you're meant to be talking, because I'm asking you the questions.
I am, absolutely. But again, thinking about personalities, like not everyone is going to resonate with with everyone out there. So
and that's a good thing. So someone comes along to you, as you probably have, because, I think it's something like 68% of the population now wants to start their own business, or it's probably even higher than that. I think there's a few other sneaky, quiet people that want to start their own business as well. So someone comes along to you, Leanne, and says, I'm thinking about starting my own business. Now, you're not a business coach per se, but you've had a lot of businesses. What would you say to them? How would you respond?
I would probably dig deeper as to their why. And I think a lot of people tend to think that they're going to start a business to create their own job, and don't necessarily have all the understanding of all of the aspects of a business that someone needs to actually have. So I think that I would start to question them why they're wanting to, and people talk about follow your passion and do what you love, and and that's really good, but sometimes like your passion and what you really want to do might not necessarily be a viable business opportunity. So I think it's really
so true.
So digging a bit deeper as to again what their experience is, what their knowledge is, what networks they've got around them, and probably starting from there. I mean, look, at the end of the day, it's a tough gig often, but I love it, having the ability to be flexible and do what you like and work with the people that you want to.
Yeah, and make money.
Make money.
Yeah.
Hopefully.
Well, ultimately, it isn't a business if you're not making money.
We'll sort of take farming out of that equation sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. Listeners, I have to tell you that Leanne and I are actually on video as well as, so you're only getting the audio. And Leanne just pulled, when I said about making money in a business, Leanne just pulled this face that said, really? So, yeah, and then she made her comment about the farming. So what 3 characteristics do you have? What are your 3 key characteristics that make you successful in business? You've alluded to a couple of them, so I know we could all answer this for you, but what do you think your 3 characteristics are?
I think my ability to see the big picture is one of my greatest strengths. My ability to create relationships and build networks is another one of them. I think that having a broad range of experience and being able to actually take from one experience and apply it to another experience. I think for me that's been, and not necessarily just in business. Like I've had, quite a few paid jobs over the years. Like I quite often worked off farm. And so those jobs that I had, again, and probably, skills wise, I always say to people, like, just because you haven't done a job for 25 years doesn't mean that the minute you leave, your brain cells, all of that's wiped out of your memory. So it's about utilizing and drawing on the skills and recognizing them over the time.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. I would have added the learning one because you talked about being, obsessed with learning new things and that. So, because that's so important when you're running a business, is this, this need, particularly as things are changing so much. But anyway, they were your 3 things.
Yeah, but yes, you're right. And one of the things that I think also is identifying and realizing your weaknesses and what you're not good at. And I hate paperwork. I hate it with a passion. I can, do the finances. I can do all of that with my eyes shut. It's not something that I love. So, so also thinking about what are the gaps that you actually have in yourself and getting someone else to do those. Because if you don't get someone else to do them, then they don't get done. You just keep putting them at the bottom of the pile. And often those detail things are some of the things that are crucial to the actual business.
And if they're not crucial every day, the moment that they become crucial, the scurrying around that you have to do to actually do it in the moment that you need it is actually, it can really bring a business unstuck, can't it? If we leave those in the back. Leanne, thank you so much for your time today. This has been an unexpectedly delightful conversation. I somehow thought it would be. I know we normally follow in this podcast the questions, but I knew because of your background and your experience that we would probably go a little off track or out back, or what do you call it when you're rough riding? What do you call that when you go off the road?
Off the beaten track.
Off the beaten track. So we've got a little bit of off the beaten track today. But before we go, so our listeners are people who are either in the early days of their business or they're thinking about getting started in business. Is there anything else that you'd like to say to our listeners before you go?
I think probably just actually build your networks. I think, that for me has been one of my strengths and one of the things that I've been able to think, okay, I don't know this right at this instant, so who else do I know that might have been there, done that, or knows someone else that could help me? So build your networks, I think, is probably one of the things that I would say to start. Yeah, would be one of the things to start with.
And LinkedIn is a great place to do that. So connect with Leanne on LinkedIn right now. Jump onto LinkedIn app.
Absolutely.
Leanne Isaacson. And do you accept all invitations on LinkedIn?
Gee, that could be another day's interview. Look.
It's always nice to put a little note. I heard you on the podcast with Ingrid Thompson, so you want to start a business, and I'd love to connect. It doesn't have to be more complex than that, does it?
No, it doesn't. And look, realistically, if I get a invitation with like an like a personalised message, I accept them regardless.
Yeah. Same with me. And it only has to be, hi, heard you on a podcast, I'd like to connect. And then you take it from there, how much more of a connection you want to have. So,
absolutely.
Leanne, thank you for your time. This has been terrific. In Adelaide and in Sydney and out there across the podcast world. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ingrid. It's been lovely.
Thanks so much for listening. Leanne had so much more to talk about and we just couldn't get to everything. So what are you taking away from this conversation? What's your one standout moment for you? Is it around the idea of being someone who loves learning? And maybe that's one of the reasons you listen to these podcasts. How are you making decisions in your business? It's tough when we're emotionally attached to an aspect of our business. How do we make the tough decisions we have to make? Who do we turn to for help? How can we bring in someone from that outside perspective? Are you good at building your network, like Leanne said at the end? Are you on LinkedIn? Feel free to connect with Leanne or myself on LinkedIn if we're not already connected. I'd love to hear what your takeaways were from this one. For everyone listening, whether this is your first episode or you've been with us for some time, I truly believe that whatever it is you're dreaming about can become real. It can become a viable business. These podcasts are designed to inspire, educate, and inform about what it takes to create, start, and grow a business of your own. We truly believe these podcast interviews provide terrific value. And if you agree, please leave your comments and rate the podcast over on iTunes. We all know this helps us spreading the show with more people. Thanks so much for that. What questions do you have? How can I help you? Have you read the book, So You Want to Start a Business? We're going to set up a So You Want to Start a Business book club. Something between a mastermind, an accountability group, and a book club. So if you're interested, please let me know through LinkedIn or ingrid@healthynumbers.com.au. I reply directly because I enjoy answering all my own emails and messages. As always, what we say ideas without action. Well, they're just that, aren't they? They're just ideas. What actions are you inspired to take today? Till the next time, thanks for listening.